An absolute miracle. That's the one word that you could use to describe the Miami Heat's historic finals run last season. Between Jimmy Butler doing stuff like this, to Caleb Martin, who was only on the team because of J. Cole dropping 20 points in a game, it's safe to say that this Heat team got everything they could out of their roster. But that's the problem. Nearly everyone aside from guys like Gabe Vincent and Max Strus performed to their best abilities, yet the Heat still fell well short to the Denver Nuggets in the NBA Finals. It was obvious that the Heat needed to make some sort of move this offseason to get some more offensive punch, because with their current roster, they just didn't have the offense to win a championship. Then it happened. Finally, Damian Lillard demanded a trade, and who was the team that he wanted to join? The Miami Heat. Yes, all of this team's problems were solved. They just had to give up Tyler Hero, who was out for their playoff run anyways, and some other small assets to get one of the best guards in the league. Easy enough, right? Well, despite this trade seeming like a layup for Miami, Portland had other plans. According to multiple reports, a package of Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and picks was nothing near what the Blazers were looking for in exchange for Damian Lillard. And they basically forced Lillard and his agent to say that he'd play for any team that traded for him. This only means one thing, and for Heat fans, this is the harsh truth that they have to hear. Unless this team pulls off a miracle 3-team trade, Damian Lillard won't end up taking his talents to South Beach, which leaves this team in the same situation that they were in last year. They still need the guy on offense that can put them over the top and make them championship favorites, and they can't wait any longer to make this trade happen. Obviously, the dream scenario for the Heat is landing Damian Lillard in a 3-team trade, but at the moment, things aren't looking too good for this deal. I made a video going over a possible trade for Damian Lillard to the Heat, Tyler Hero to the Nets, and Ben Simmons, Duncan Robinson, Nikola Jovic, and the rights to 6th-round picks to the Blazers. And even though this is a massive return for Portland, I still had people saying that this wasn't enough and they hated this trade, especially because of Ben Simmons. Given that these 3 teams are the only teams to discuss a 3-team deal centered around Dame, it seems like there isn't a huge market to get involved regarding sending Damian Lillard to Miami. This obviously puts the Heat in a very tough spot, given that they let guys like Gabe Vincent and Max Strus go for absolutely nothing, because they were like, oh, who needs these guys? We're gonna get Damian Lillard. And despite solid young prospects like Jaime Jaquez and Nikola Jovic, this team is definitely in a worse spot than they were at the beginning of the offseason, which honestly exposes their biggest problem that they've yet to resolve. Since Jimmy Butler joined the Heat, they have obviously been his team. You had the Bubbles final run back in 2020 where Jimmy put the team on his back and this team played like a bunch of dogs, which reignited the Heat culture. Then you obviously had this past season, going from a play-in team to a finals appearance. I'm just as big of a fan of the Heat culture as anyone else. I mean, I love seeing this team find diamonds in the rough every year and turn them into players that can contribute at the highest level. But honestly, that's the problem for this team. They shouldn't be a team that has to rely on guys like Caleb Martin to drop 20 points in a playoff game to get them the win. And obviously, this isn't always the case, but there have been many instances in which the Heat offense is simply dead, and guys like Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo don't have what it takes to put this team over the top and outscore their opponents. Sure, Jimmy can put the team on his back most of the time, but it has been very clear since the moment he joined this team, they need a second option on offense that could maybe even produce more than Jimmy. And it's not like they should have gotten this person right away, because honestly at first, they thought that Bam Adebayo was going to be this guy. I mean, he had the ceiling of being a two-way monster and producing a ton on the offensive end. And although he's one of the better defensive bigs in the entire NBA, he clearly hasn't lived up to these offensive expectations. But with that being said, the Heat still have a chance to redeem themselves and get a star that can help them win at the highest level next season. But the question is, who? I mean, Bradley Beal is officially shipped out, Chris Paul didn't end up getting bought out, and there aren't really any disgruntled stars on the market right now. Well, there are actually 3 star players that have been in the rumors that we could realistically see the Heat trade for, and it would put them over the top, making them championship contenders at the very least. In an ideal world, the Heat would be able to pick up a younger guard that is an absolute bucket getter on the offensive end. But looking around the league, there actually aren't many guards guards on the market at this moment. Sure, you have guys like Zach LaVine and maybe Kyrie Irving if the Mavericks flop next season, but I just can't see the Heat being able to make a swing for a trade like that, especially if the market is pretty dry and the demand for these guys is very high. Realistically, this team is most likely to trade for a forward that's also capable of handling the ball. And one of the more interesting trade targets that this team could consider is none other than Mikal Bridges. No Dame, no problem. The Heat cut out the Blazers from the 3-team trade mentioned earlier and instead make a blockbuster trade for Mikal Bridges. The Nets are obviously in an interesting situation after losing Kyrie, James Harden, and Kevin Durant. Sure, the team could try and win now, and yes, they definitely have a fun team that's giving 2019 Nets vibes, but could they really win a championship with this roster? I don't think so. So why not take advantage of a team like the Heat, who is kind of desperate to trade for a star and get some young assets to kickstart your rebuild? As far as Bridges goes, he's a match made in heaven for a team like the Heat. Not only has he shown all-star potential on the offensive end if given a bigger role, but he's also one of the better wing defenders in the entire league with a staggering 7'1" wingspan. So not only do the Heat get a much needed boost on the offensive end, but their defense also probably elevates with this trade as well, which could make them the best defending team in the entire NBA. It's hard to say what a package would look like for Miami, but it would probably center around Tyler Hero, one of the Heat's other young players on a cheap deal, and a good amount of picks to make this trade worthwhile for Brooklyn. Honestly though, there is a good chance that the Nets shoot this trade down, because I think they're quite aware of what Bridges has the potential to turn into. They're next Kevin Durant. But there is a very similar player that the Heat could make a trade for that honestly might be better on the offensive end than Bridges. That player being Brandon Ingram. Obviously, the Pelicans aren't really near contention, but they also aren't bad enough to tank for draft picks, so they're kind of in that middle spot that absolutely no NBA team wants to be in. So maybe we could see them pulling the plug on Ingram and going into the more rebuilding stage of this process. Ingram is an elite 3-level scorer that not only provides production on the offensive end that the Heat desperately need, but he also holds his own on the defensive end as well. And honestly, has a very similar build and game to Mikal Bridges. The fit is just too perfect, and in this hypothetical trade, the Heat send off Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and Nikola Jovic along with draft capital if needed for Brandon Ingram and Larry Nance Jr. Sure, this isn't an insane haul for the Pelicans, but you have to keep in mind that after this season, Brandon Ingram will only have 1 year left on his deal, and if the Pelicans think that he'll sign elsewhere, they might as well trade him now and get some value, so they aren't left scrambling to trade him when he's on an expiring deal. Plain and simple, Brandon Ingram is a bucket getter. I mean, this guy didn't shave anything for months because he was so focused on the game. And to me, that sounds like a perfect fit with the Heat culture. But there is one more interesting prospect that the Heat could make a swing for. I mentioned Zach LaVine, but what about his teammate, DeMar DeRozan? Is he old? Yeah. Does he have limitations on the defensive end of the ball? Yeah. But guess what? DeMar DeRozan wouldn't cost nearly as much for the Heat as guys like Mikal Bridges and Brandon Ingram would. And he still gives the Heat team that offensive punch they need in order to reach the next level. DeMar is on the last year of his deal, so if he verbally commits to a 2 or 3 year extension with the Heat, we could see them making this move. But regardless of who they target, one thing is clear. The Heat need to make a big trade to get that offensive boost if they want to contend next season, because obviously they just don't have enough to do that. But this isn't the only team in need of a star. The Lakers just revealed their future plans after signing Anthony Davis to a massive extension. Click here to watch and see why this team could make a trade for a big star like Trae Young sooner rather than later.